The rain fell in sheets that night, washing away footprints and evidence alike. By the time Mark Holloway found Officer Sarah Chen bleeding out in the alley behind his apartment building, she had already lost too much blood. What happened in the following 72 hours would not only change their lives forever but send shockwaves through an entire police department that had forgotten what it meant to serve and protect. If you're wondering whether one ordinary man and his daughter could bring down a network of corruption that had festered for decades, stay with me until the end. This is a story about sacrifice, redemption, and the kind of courage that emerges when we have nothing left to lose. If this story moves you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of everyday heroes to light. Mark Holloway hadn't slept properly in 3 years, not since his wife's death left him the sole parent to their daughter, Emma. Tonight was no different. At 2:17 a.m., he stood at his kitchen window, nursing a cup of tea that had long gone cold, watching raindrops race down the glass. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty, despite Emma sleeping soundly in her room down the hall. A flash of movement in the alley below caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another stray cat seeking shelter from the downpour. But then he saw it, a hand reaching upward before falling limply to the ground. Mark didn't think. He grabbed his phone and keys, pulled on his boots without bothering to tie them, and rushed downstairs. The security door to the building slammed behind him as he stepped into the rain. "Hello?" he called out, squinting through the darkness. "Is someone there?" A weak groan answered him. Following the sound, Mark found a woman slumped against the brick wall, her police uniform soaked through with rain and blood. "Oh my God," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "I'm calling an ambulance." The woman's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "No," she rasped. "No ambulance. No police." "You are the police," Mark said, noticing her badge. "Officer S. Chen." "That's why," she said, her eyes fluttering. "Can't trust them." "Not now." Mark hesitated, his finger hovering over the emergency call button. "You're bleeding out. You need help." Officer Chen's eyes found his, suddenly clear and desperate. "Please. They'll finish the job." A chill ran through Mark that had nothing to do with the rain. Who? Who will finish the job? But Officer Chen's eyes had closed, her breathing shallow and labored. Mark made a decision that would alter the course of his life. Instead of calling 911, he gathered the wounded officer in his arms and carried her back to his apartment. Emma Holloway was 10 years old, with her mother's curly hair and her father's stubborn chin. She woke to the sound of urgent whispers and the metallic smell of blood. "Dad," she called, padding down the hallway in her unicorn pajamas. She found her father in the bathroom, his hands red with blood as he pressed a towel against a woman's side. The woman lay in their bathtub, pale and still. "Emma, go back to bed," Mark said, his voice strained. But Emma didn't move. "Is she dead?" "No, honey. But she's hurt badly. I need to help her." Emma stepped closer, her eyes wide. "She's a police officer." "Yes. Then why didn't you call more police officers to help?" Mark met his daughter's gaze, unsure how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. Sometimes the people who are supposed to help us can't. Or won't." Emma considered this, then nodded with the solemn acceptance only children can muster. "I'll get my first aid kit. The one with the real bandages, not the princess ones." As Emma disappeared down the hall, Mark turned back to Officer Chen. Her eyes had opened again, watching him. "You have a daughter," she whispered. "Yes. Emma. She's 10. You shouldn't have brought me here. It puts you both in danger." Mark continued cleaning the wound in her side. It looked like a knife wound, deep but clean. "What was I supposed to do? Leave you to die in an alley?" "Maybe. Officer Chen winced as he applied pressure. It might have been kinder in the long run. I don't believe that, Mark said firmly. And I don't think you do either, or you wouldn't have been fighting so hard to stay alive when I found you. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Sarah, she said. My name is Sarah. Mark, he replied. Mark Holloway. Emma returned with her first aid kit, her small face set with determination. I brought the antiseptic too. Mom always said it was important to clean wounds properly. Sarah's eyes softened at the sight of the child. Your mom sounds smart. She was, Emma said matter-of-factly. She was a nurse. She died. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. It's okay. It was a long time ago. Emma handed her father the antiseptic. Are you going to die too? Sarah looked at the child, then at Mark. Something passed between them, a silent understanding, a promise. Not if I can help it, she said. By morning, Sarah's fever had broken. Mark had managed to stop the bleeding and clean the wound, but she was still weak from blood loss. He called in sick to his job at the architectural firm, something he rarely did. You should eat something, he told Sarah, who was now resting on their couch, wrapped in blankets. I need to make a call first, she said. Someone I trust. The only one left, maybe. Mark handed her his phone hesitantly. You said last night that we couldn't trust the police. That they'd finish the job. What did you mean? Sarah took the phone but didn't dial immediately. How much do you want to know, Mark? Really? Because once I tell you, there's no going back. Mark thought about Emma, about the life they'd rebuilt after losing his wife to cancer. It had taken years to find a semblance of normalcy again. Whatever Sarah was involved in would shatter that hard-won peace. But he looked at the wounded officer on his couch, at the determination in her eyes despite her injuries, and knew he couldn't turn away. Tell me, he said. Sarah nodded. I'm with Internal Affairs. For the past year, I've been investigating a group of officers in the department who've been working with the Castillo cartel. Protection, tip-offs about raids, even helping move product. Mark felt his stomach drop. And they found out? Last night, I was supposed to meet a confidential informant. Someone inside the operation who wanted out. But they got to him first, and then they came for me. Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to her wounded side. My partner, Detective Rivera, he's the only one I trust completely. He's been working the case with me from outside the department. Call him, Mark said. Sarah dialed, her fingers trembling slightly. After a brief, coded conversation, she hung up. He's coming. But Mark. She looked at him intently. You and Emma need to be gone before he gets here. The less you know, the safer you'll be. Mark shook his head. We're already involved. And you're in no condition to be moved yet. These people don't mess around, Sarah insisted. They're cops, Mark. They have resources, authority. If they find out you helped me. Dad? Emma stood in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. I'm going to be late for school. Mark checked his watch, cursing under his breath. In the chaos, he'd lost track of time. I'll take her, Sarah offered, then smiled wryly at her own condition. Or not. I can walk myself, Emma said proudly. It's only 3 blocks. No, both adults said simultaneously. Mark grabbed his keys. I'll drive you, Em. Just give me 2 minutes. As he helped Emma with her coat, Sarah called out, Mark? The blue sedan across the street. Is it usually there? Mark froze, then casually glanced out the window. A dark blue Ford was parked directly opposite their building, 2 men sitting inside. No, he said quietly. It's not. Sarah's face hardened. They found me faster than I thought. They must have followed the blood trail to your building. She struggled to sit up. You need to get Emma out of here. Now. But not through the front. There's a service exit through the basement, Mark said, his mind racing. But what about you? I'll be fine. Detective Rivera will be here soon. She didn't sound convinced. Go. Please. Mark hesitated, then made another life-altering decision. Emma, change of plans. We're playing hooky today. Emma's eyes widened. Really? But I have a math test. Sometimes there are more important things than math tests, Mark said, trying to keep his voice light. Like helping people who need us. He turned to Sarah. We're not leaving you. All of us are going out through the basement. Now. The basement of the apartment building was damp and dimly lit, filled with storage cages and forgotten furniture. Mark led the way, supporting Sarah with one arm while holding Emma's hand with the other. The service door leads to the next street over, he explained in a hushed voice. From there, we can take the bus to my sister's place in Westview. They'll check with your family, Sarah warned. Not this sister, Mark said grimly. Lily and I haven't spoken in years. Not since. He glanced at Emma, then fell silent. They reached the service door, only to find it chained shut from the outside. No, 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 Mark muttered, rattling the handle uselessly. Sarah leaned against the wall, her face pale with exertion. Is there another way out? The parking garage, Emma suggested. It connects to the building next door. Mom used to take that way when it snowed because it's covered. Mark looked at his daughter with newfound appreciation. You're right. But it's closer to the front of the building. They might see us. We don't have a choice, Sarah said. And I need to sit down soon, or I'm going to pass out. They retraced their steps, moving toward the parking garage. As they approached the connecting door, they heard footsteps from the stairwell. Hide, Mark whispered, pulling them behind a large storage unit. Two men entered the basement, their footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. Even in the dim light, the bulges of their shoulder holsters were visible. Check every corner, one of them ordered. Chen's wounded. She couldn't have gone far. What about the guy who helped her? Holloway? Him and the kid are secondary. We find Chen first, deal with the loose ends after. Mark felt Emma tremble beside him. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silently praying she wouldn't make a sound. The men moved methodically through the basement, checking behind each storage cage. They were getting closer. Sarah met Mark's eyes, then reached for her ankle. To his surprise, she pulled out a small backup weapon. You're armed, he mouthed. She nodded, then whispered, when I create a distraction, take Emma and run for the garage. We're not leaving you, Mark insisted. You have to. Emma needs her father. Sarah's eyes were resolute. Please, Mark. Let me do this one thing right. Before he could argue further, Sarah pushed herself to her feet and staggered into the open, her gun held steady despite her weakness. Looking for me, she called out. The men spun around, reaching for their weapons. Officer Chen, one of them said, his tone almost conversational. You've led us on quite a chase. Sorry to disappoint you, Reyes, Sarah replied. But I'm not dying in some basement today. The man named Reyes smiled coldly. No? Where do you think you're dying then? She's not, came a new voice from the stairwell. All heads turned to see a tall man with a detective's badge standing in the doorway, his weapon trained on the two corrupt officers. Rivera, Reyes spat. Should have known you'd be in on this too. Detective Rivera stepped forward, his gun unwavering. Sarah, you okay? Been better, she admitted. The standoff stretched for a tense moment, for armed individuals with fingers on triggers, each waiting for someone else to make the first move. It was Emma who broke the silence. Unable to contain herself any longer, she let out a small, frightened whimper. Reyes's head snapped toward the sound. "The kid," he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Come out, wherever you are." Mark made a split-second decision. Pushing Emma behind a concrete pillar, he stepped into the open. "Leave my daughter out of this." "Mark, no!" Sarah cried. But it was too late. The basement erupted in gunfire. The next few moments passed in a blur of noise and chaos. Mark dove for cover as bullets ricocheted off concrete. He heard Sarah and Rivera returning fire, heard the shouts and curses of the corrupt officers. Then, suddenly, silence. "Emma?" Mark called out, his voice breaking with fear. "Emma! Daddy!" Her small voice came from behind the pillar where he'd left her. Mark rushed to her, gathering her in his arms, checking frantically for injuries. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. Mark looked up to see Rivera kneeling beside Sarah, who was slumped against the wall, a fresh bloodstain spreading across her shirt. "Sarah!" Mark moved toward her, still clutching Emma. "It's just a graze," Sarah said through gritted teeth. But it reopened the knife wound. Rivera looked grim. "We need to get her to a hospital." "No hospitals," Sarah insisted. "They'll have people watching." On the floor nearby, Reyes groaned. He was alive, a bullet wound in his shoulder rendering his gun arm useless. His partner lay motionless a few feet away. Rivera secured Reyes with handcuffs. "This isn't over, Sarah. They'll send more." "I know," she said weakly. "But I have the evidence. It's on a flash drive. Hidden." Mark looked between them, still holding Emma protectively. "What happens now?" Rivera considered him thoughtfully. "You've already risked too much, Mr. Holloway. Take your daughter and go. Forget you ever met Officer Chen." "No," Mark said firmly. "I'm not walking away from this." Sarah reached out, touching his arm. "Mark, think about Emma." "I am thinking about Emma," he replied. "I'm thinking about what kind of world I want her to grow up in. One where good people stand by and do nothing, or one where we fight for what's right, even when it's hard." He looked down at his daughter. "What do you think, Em?" Emma wiped her tears, her young face suddenly determined. "We help Officer Sarah," she said simply. Sarah looked at them both, her expression a mixture of gratitude and concern. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not," Mark acknowledged. "But I know what happens if people like you fight alone. The bad guys win." Rivera checked his watch. "We need to move. I have a safe house, but we can't stay there long." As they helped Sarah to her feet, Mark knew their lives would never be the same. But looking at his daughter's resolute face, he felt something he hadn't experienced since losing his wife: purpose. The safe house was a small cabin on the outskirts of town, isolated enough to provide cover but close enough to the city for Rivera to maintain contact with his trusted allies in the department. For 3 days, they existed in a state of tense vigilance. Sarah's condition improved slowly, her strength returning bit by bit. Emma, displaying resilience that amazed the adults, appointed herself Sarah's personal nurse, carefully changing bandages and ensuring she took her medication on schedule. Mark and Rivera took turns keeping watch, their conversations gradually evolving from wary exchanges to something approaching friendship. "How did you get involved in all this?" Mark asked on the second night, as they sat on the cabin's small porch, the forest around them alive with nocturnal sounds. Rivera sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "Sarah and I were rookies together. We saw things that didn't add up. Officers living beyond their means. Evidence disappearing. Suspects walking free who shouldn't have. And you decided to investigate? Not right away. We tried to play by the rules first. Reported our concerns up the chain of command. Rivera's laugh was bitter. That's when we realized how deep it went. Captain, lieutenants, even people in the DA's office. So you went undercover? Sarah did. Internal Affairs. Sarah did. Internal Affairs recruited her. I stayed on the outside, maintained my reputation as just another cop who looks the other way. It was the only way to keep her safe. Rivera's eyes darkened with memory. Or so I thought. Mark watched Emma through the window as she carefully arranged Sarah's pillows. How many are involved? At least 20 officers. Maybe more. The Castillo cartel has been buying protection for years, but lately, it's escalated. Some of our people aren't just taking bribes anymore, they're actively participating in the operation. Like Reyes? Rivera nodded. He and his partner were enforcers. When dealers didn't pay up or when someone threatened to expose the operation, they handled it. And now they'll be coming for all of us, Mark said quietly. Yes. Rivera didn't sugarcoat it. But Sarah has something they want desperately. Evidence that could bring down the entire network. The flash drive she mentioned? It contains everything. Financial records, photos, recorded conversations. Names, dates, amounts. Everything needed to prosecute not just the corrupt cops but the cartel leaders too. Mark frowned. If the evidence is so important, why haven't you turned it over to? I don't know, the FBI? Someone outside the local department? Because we don't know how far the corruption reaches, Sarah said, appearing in the doorway. She looked stronger than she had that morning, though she leaned heavily on the door frame. We've identified at least 2 federal agents who might be compromised. So what's the plan? Mark asked. Sarah and Rivera exchanged glances. Tomorrow, Sarah said, we make contact with the one person we know we can trust. The Assistant District Attorney, Diane Foster. She's been building a case against the cartel for years, independent of the police department. Can she protect us? Mark asked, thinking of Emma. She can get us federal marshals, Rivera said. Witness protection, if necessary. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Witness protection would mean new identities, a new city, leaving behind everything and everyone they knew. I need to talk to Emma about this, Mark said finally. Sarah nodded. Of course. But Mark, I want you to know that I never meant for you and Emma to get caught up in this. If there was any way I could fix this without. Don't, Mark interrupted gently. We made our choice. And honestly, it's the first time since losing Claire that I've felt like I'm doing something that matters. Sarah's eyes softened. Tell me about her. Your wife? Mark smiled, the familiar ache in his chest when he thought of Claire tempered now by fond memories. She was a fighter. Stubborn as hell. Even when the cancer was winning, she never stopped planning for the future, Emma's future. She sounds remarkable. She was. Mark looked at Sarah thoughtfully. She would have liked you. Something passed between them then, a quiet understanding that neither was ready to name. Inside, Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, her small hand still clutching the first aid kit she'd been so proud to contribute. Get some rest, Rivera said, checking his weapon. I'll take first watch. The morning brought rain again, a steady downpour that shrouded the cabin in mist. Rivera had left before dawn to make contact with ADA Foster, leaving Mark and Sarah to prepare for their departure. How are you feeling? Mark asked, watching Sarah test her injured side by stretching carefully. Like I've been stabbed and shot, she replied with a wry smile. But I'll manage. Emma emerged from the small bedroom, her curls wild from sleep. Is Detective Rivera back yet? Not yet, sweetheart, Mark said. But he will be soon. Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, wincing slightly at the movement. Emma, your dad and I need to talk to you about something important. Emma's expression grew serious. Are the bad policemen coming? Not if we can help it, Sarah assured her. But we need to go somewhere safe today. And after that, things might change for a while. What kind of things? Emma asked. Mark joined them, sitting on the coffee table across from his daughter. We might need to move away, Em. Change our names. Start fresh somewhere new. Emma considered this, her young face thoughtful. Because the bad guys know who we are? Yes, Sarah said. And they might try to hurt us to keep their secrets. Would I still be able to do gymnastics? Mark smiled at the quintessentially childlike concern. I'm sure we could find you a new gymnastics class. And would we still be together? You, me, and Officer Sarah? The adults exchanged surprised glances. Emma, Mark began carefully, Officer Chen has her own life. Once this is over and she's safe. But she needs us, Emma insisted. And we need her. She makes you smile again, Dad. Like you used to with Mom. Mark felt heat rise to his face. Emma, that's not. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted him. Rivera had returned. But as they moved to the window, Mark's heart sank. It wasn't Rivera's car approaching the cabin, but two police cruisers. Get down, Sarah hissed, pulling Emma away from the window. Mark peered through the curtains. 4 officers. Armed. Sarah reached for her weapon, checking the ammunition. Mark, take Emma out the back. There's a trail through the woods that leads to the highway. Flag down a car, get as far away as possible. We're not leaving you, Mark insisted. This isn't a debate. Sarah's eyes flashed with determination. I started this. I'll finish it. And what happens when they kill you and come after us anyway? Mark challenged. We stay together. All of us. Outside, car doors slammed. A voice called out through a megaphone, Officer Chen. We know you're in there. Come out with your hands up. Sarah looked at Mark and Emma, indecision warring with resolve on her face. I can't let anything happen to you too. Nothing will, Mark promised, though he had no right to make such a guarantee. We'll find another way out. Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve. The basement, she whispered. What basement, honey? Sarah asked. Detective Rivera showed me yesterday. There's a cellar door under the rug in the bedroom. He said it was an emergency exit. Mark and Sarah stared at the child in amazement. Emma Holloway, you are brilliant, Sarah declared, pressing a quick kiss to the girl's forehead. They hurried to the bedroom, pulling back the threadbare rug to reveal a trapdoor. Mark yanked it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. I'll go first, he said, already lowering himself down. A crash from the front of the cabin told them the officers had begun their entry. Sarah urged Emma toward the trapdoor. Quickly, sweetheart. Go to your dad. Emma scrambled down the ladder into Mark's waiting arms. Sarah followed, pulling the trapdoor closed above them just as the bedroom door burst open. They found themselves in a narrow tunnel, barely tall enough for Mark to stand upright. Which way? He whispered. Sarah pointed to a faint light at the far end. That has to lead outside. They moved as quickly and quietly as possible, Sarah gritting her teeth against the pain of her injuries. Above them, they could hear the muffled sounds of the officers searching the cabin. The tunnel emerged in a dense thicket about 50 yards from the cabin. Through the trees, they could see the police cruisers parked in front. Now what? Mark asked, holding Emma close. Sarah scanned their surroundings. We need transportation. As if in answer to her words, the distinctive rumble of Rivera's car approached from the main road. He doesn't know they're here, Sarah realized with horror. They'll ambush him. Without hesitation, she stepped out of the cover of the trees and fired 2 shots into the air. The officers at the cabin immediately turned toward the sound. Sarah, no! Mark cried, but it was too late. Rivera's car screeched to a halt at the sound of gunfire. The corrupt officers spotted Sarah and opened fire. She dove back into the trees as bullets splintered bark around them. Run, she shouted to Mark and Emma. Get to Rivera. Mark hesitated for only a second before scooping Emma into his arms and sprinting through the woods toward the road. Behind them, Sarah provided covering fire, drawing the officers' attention away from their escape. Rivera had taken cover behind his vehicle, his weapon drawn. When he spotted Mark and Emma, he motioned them toward him. Where's Sarah? He demanded as they reached him. Covering our escape, Mark panted. We have to help her. Rivera nodded grimly. Get in the car. Stay down. Mark placed Emma on the floor of the back seat. Don't move, no matter what happens. Promise me. I promise, Emma whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Mark and Rivera moved toward the woods, using the car as cover. The gunfire had intensified, Sarah clearly outmatched against the 4 officers. On 3, Rivera said, we provide suppressing fire. Sarah knows to fall back toward us when she hears us. Mark nodded, gripping the pistol Rivera had handed him. 1, 2, 3. They opened fire, aiming high to avoid hitting Sarah. The corrupt officers ducked for cover, momentarily ceasing their advance. Sarah! Rivera shouted. Fall back. Now! For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then Sarah emerged from the trees, running in a crouch, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. She had almost reached them when a shot rang out. Sarah stumbled, falling forward onto the gravel road. No! Mark screamed, moving to run to her. Rivera held him back. Cover me. The detective darted forward, grabbing Sarah under the arms and dragging her toward the car as Mark fired wildly in the direction of the officers. They managed to get Sarah into the back seat beside Emma. Blood soaked through her shirt, she'd been hit in the shoulder. Drive. Rivera ordered, jumping into the passenger seat as Mark took the wheel. The car fishtailed on the wet gravel as Mark accelerated away from the cabin, bullets pinging off the trunk. Is she okay? He asked, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Emma had Sarah's head cradled in her lap. She's breathing, the girl reported, her voice surprisingly steady. But there's a lot of blood. The flash drive, Sarah murmured, her eyes fluttering open. We need the flash drive. Where is it? Rivera asked urgently. Sarah's hand moved weakly to her neck, pulling at a thin chain hidden beneath her shirt. On it hung a small, metallic object disguised as a pendant. Smart, Rivera said, taking it from her. Now save your strength. We're getting you to help. No hospitals, Sarah insisted. Not a hospital, Rivera assured her. ADA Foster has a doctor waiting. Someone we can trust. Mark drove as fast as he dared on the rain-slicked roads, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Emma had torn strips from her own shirt to press against Sarah's wound, her small face set with determination. You're going to be okay, Emma told Sarah firmly. Dad and I won't let you die. Sarah managed a weak smile. Wouldn't dream of it, kiddo. Mark caught her eye in the rearview mirror, his heart constricting at the sight of her pale face. Hold on, Sarah. Just hold on. The safe house ADA Diane Foster had arranged was a converted warehouse in the industrial district. As promised, a doctor was waiting, a former military medic who asked no questions as he worked on Sarah's wounds. She's lucky, he told them after stabilizing her. The bullet went through clean. No major arteries hit. With rest and antibiotics, she should recover. Mark felt weak with relief. Emma had refused to leave Sarah's side, holding her hand throughout the procedure with a maturity beyond her years. Rivera and Foster were huddled in the corner, examining the contents of the flash drive on a laptop. "This is everything we need," Foster said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Names, dates, bank accounts. Enough to take down the entire operation." "What about the officers who attacked us at the cabin?" Mark asked. "I've got trusted agents bringing them in now," Foster assured him. "With the evidence Sarah collected, they'll be facing federal charges. No one's going to sweep this under the rug." Mark nodded, but his mind was already moving beyond the immediate crisis. "And after? What happens to us?" Foster's expression softened. "Witness protection is still the safest option, Mr. Holloway. For all of you. All of us." Mark glanced at Sarah, who was now sleeping, Emma curled up beside her on the narrow cot. "Officer Chen will need protection as well," Foster confirmed. "The cartel has a long memory and deep pockets. Even with their police connection severed, they'll want revenge." Mark absorbed this, watching his daughter and the woman who had so unexpectedly entered their lives. In just a few days, Sarah had become important to them both in ways he couldn't fully articulate. "We'll do whatever it takes to stay safe," he said finally. "But we stay together." Foster raised an eyebrow. "That's not typically how the program works, Mr. Holloway. Witnesses are usually placed separately to minimize risk." "Then we'll be the exception," Mark insisted. "Emma's already lost her mother. I won't let her lose anyone else she cares about." Rivera, who had been listening silently, spoke up. "They've earned the right to make that choice, Diane. All of them have." Foster studied them thoughtfully, then nodded. "I'll see what I can arrange." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of federal agents, depositions, and preparations. Sarah regained her strength gradually, though she still moved with careful deliberation. The evidence she had collected proved even more damaging than anticipated. 23 officers were arrested, along with 3 federal agents and the entire upper echelon of the Castillo cartel's local operation. On the third day, as they prepared to leave for their new lives, Rivera visited one last time. "You're not coming with us?" Emma asked, disappointed. Rivera shook his head, kneeling to her level. "I still have work to do here, making sure all the bad guys face justice. But maybe someday, when it's safe, we'll see each other again." Emma hugged him fiercely. "You promise?" "I promise," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He stood, shaking Mark's hand. "Take care of them." "I will," Mark vowed. Rivera moved to Sarah last, embracing her carefully to avoid her injuries. "I always knew you were the bravest cop in the department," he told her. "Now everyone else knows it too." Sarah blinked back tears. "We did it together. Partners." "Always," Rivera agreed. He pressed something into her hand, her police badge, polished and restored. "Keep this. Somewhere safe. To remember who you are." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. As Rivera left, 2 federal marshals entered, carrying the final documents for their new identities. "Ready?" one asked. Mark looked at Sarah and Emma, the unlikely family forged in crisis. "Ready," he confirmed. 6 months later, in a small coastal town 3 states away, Mark Holloway, now Mark Sullivan, stood on the deck of a modest beachfront house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, he could hear Emma and Sarah laughing as they prepared dinner together. The sound filled him with a contentment he had thought lost forever after Claire's death. Their new life wasn't perfect. There were nightmares, moments of paralyzing fear when a car lingered too long outside their home or when a stranger paid too much attention to them in town. Sarah still carried the physical and emotional scars of her ordeal, sometimes waking in the night, reaching instinctively for a weapon that was no longer there. But there was also healing. Emma had joined the local gymnastics team and was flourishing in her new school. Mark had found work as a draftsman at a small architectural firm, his talents quickly earning him respect and responsibility. And Sarah, now Sarah Sullivan, had discovered a gift for teaching, volunteering at the community center to help immigrants prepare for their citizenship tests. The door slid open behind him, and Sarah stepped onto the deck, handing him a glass of wine. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, leaning against the railing beside him. "Just thinking about how much has changed," he said. 6 months ago, I was a single dad just trying to get through each day. Now you're still a dad," Sarah said. "Just not single anymore." Mark smiled, taking her hand. The simple gold band on her finger caught the fading sunlight. Their courthouse wedding 3 months ago had been small but joyful, with Emma serving as both flower girl and ring bearer. "Any regrets?" he asked. Sarah considered the question, her gaze drifting to the horizon where sea met sky. "About leaving my old life? Sometimes. I worked hard to become a cop, to make a difference." She touched her side where the scars remained. "But about finding you and Emma that night? Never." She leaned into him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We made a difference, Mark. A real one. The case against the cartel and the corrupt officers is still making headlines back home. Rivera says the department is being rebuilt from the ground up. Do you miss it? Being a cop?" "Parts of it," she admitted. "The purpose, the clarity of knowing I was doing something that mattered." She turned to face him fully. "But I've found new purpose here. With you and Emma. Building something that can't be taken away by a bullet or a knife." Inside, Emma called that dinner was ready. As they turned to go in, Mark paused, drawing Sarah back for a moment. "You know, when Claire died, I thought that was it for me. That I'd spend the rest of my life just going through the motions for Emma's sake." He touched Sarah's cheek gently. "I never expected to find love again in an alley behind our apartment building." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face in the golden light. "Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." "Dad." "Sarah. The pasta's getting cold," Emma called impatiently. They laughed, heading inside to join their daughter. As Mark closed the door behind them, he caught a glimpse of their reflection in the glass, the three of them, together. A family forged in crisis, strengthened by courage, bound by love. 3 years later, the story of Officer Sarah Chen and the single father who saved her life became the subject of a major investigation by a national news program. The expose revealed the full extent of the corruption that had infiltrated the police department and the extraordinary courage of the ordinary people who helped bring it down. The Castillo cartel had been dismantled, its leaders serving life sentences. The corrupt officers had been convicted, their betrayal of the badge serving as a cautionary tale for departments across the country. Detective Rivera had been promoted to captain, leading the reform department with integrity and transparency. And somewhere, in a coastal town with a new name and a new life, a family watched the report together, recognizing their story even as the details had been changed to protect them. "Is that really us?" 12-year-old Emma asked, her head tilted curiously at the screen. "In a way," Sarah answered, her hand resting protectively on the slight swell of her belly where their second child grew. "It's who we were. But not who we are now," Mark added, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Emma considered this, then nodded with the wisdom children sometimes possess. "I like who we are now better." As the program ended, the reporter looked directly into the camera with a solemn expression. The whereabouts of Officer Chen and the Holloway family remain confidential to this day, protected by the Federal Witness Program. But their legacy lives on in a police department transformed, in a community freed from the grip of corruption and fear. Their courage reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are ordinary people who, when faced with impossible choices, choose to do what's right, no matter the cost. Mark switched off the television, the room falling into comfortable silence. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't looked out your window that night? Sarah asked quietly. Mark thought about the man he had been then, lost, going through the motions, his grief a constant companion. He thought about the woman Sarah had been, wounded, alone, fighting a battle too big for one person. I don't believe in coincidences, he said finally. I think maybe we were always meant to find each other. Sarah smiled, taking his hand. A single dad and a dying cop. Who would have thought? I would, Emma declared confidently. It's like in my books. The unlikely heroes always find each other when they need it most. Outside their window, the sun set on another day in their new life, painting the sky in shades of promise. The past hadn't been forgotten, it had shaped them, strengthened them, led them here. But it no longer defined them. What defined them now was the family they had built together. A family that had begun with a single act of courage on a rainy night, when a man looked out his window and chose not to look away. The end. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of everyday heroes. Remember, sometimes the most extraordinary courage comes from ordinary people who refuse to look the other way when someone needs help. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us, sometimes in the most unexpected ways.